This is special bonus episode 71B, and I say that not because it's related to 71, but because it falls directly between 71 and 72. So this is separate from our normally scheduled programming. Today's episode is actually a recording of a seminar that I gave for the Rise Network at the end of May. And this is a talk I did on student rentals, my philosophy on investing, and how I got started, some of the hiccups along the way, and then I did about a 20-minute discussion at the end of it, just taking Q&A and then going through a spreadsheet that I created to analyze deals so that I could size them up in a few minutes. That's something that I actually do share at the end of the episode, but you also can just, if you'd like, go to andrew-hines.com/cash flow if you'd like to get access to that sheet. What I'd suggest you do with this episode is feel free to listen to the audio version if you happen to be driving or you're listening to it on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or wherever you happen to enjoy your episodes. And if you would like to really dig into the numbers and the Q&A at the end of the episode, I would suggest you actually go to the YouTube version. So if you want to access that directly, just use my link tree. You can either use that through Instagram, or you can just simply go to YouTube and search my name. You will definitely find my channel. Again, this is episode 71B. Thanks so much for your continued loyalty to this podcast. Please enjoy this presentation. Okay. So, just to build off of your point before we even get into it is not just with investment advice and everything that's going on right now. You have to realize that every single person has bias in everything they're saying. Every single news headline, every single politician across the board has an agenda of some sort, has a bias of some sort, whether it's a paid agenda or just a personal preference. They all exist. So I think that it's a very adult thing to just admit that that's the case and question everything. And that's kind of what led me to be a real estate investor. If I hadn't, I would have, just been working a regular 9-to-5 job. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I wouldn't have gone down this road at all if I hadn't. And I think the thing that makes us all alike as real estate investors is that we all thought about something critically at one point and decided, hey, the normal plan doesn't work. And how much of a silly failure is that of our educational system that's where we're at. This is what we do. And not that many people are in fact real estate investors. So I'm just going to try and see if I can get the comments up here on the screen too. I can't see any of them.
You should have it on the side pop out. I'll read it to you if there's anything.
Yeah, if stuff comes up, just chime in because with the presenter view on here, I can't see. But anyway, so I'm going to just jump into this. And I have a bunch of slides here, but I might skip some of the stuff so we can just get to questions. And I can show you, I'm going to go through my spreadsheet at the end and we can kind of just get into some analysis and some of the ways I look at properties and, of course, COVID related too. All right, so building generational wealth through student rentals, investing. A little bit about me. I've been an investor since 2011. I actually graduated from Ivy at Western University, and in 2010, I got my mortgage agent license because I wanted to learn about real estate investing. I am a student rental investor and operator. And I also own a construction company, and I do a lot of new construction homes. I consult for investors and developers, and I also use that construction company for my own projects. And then I think many of you are probably familiar with my podcast. If not, by all means, I'd be honored if you'd give it a listen. And you can just search my name, Andrew Hines, on any of the podcast platforms and YouTube, and you'll be able to find it. Okay, so let's click over to the next slide here. Okay, that's not wanting to work, but I'll do it manually. Okay, so today I'm going to take a bit of a different approach. And if anyone saw me at the Right Club, this is a similar presentation. But I'm going to just kind of tell you my story and some of the lessons I learned along the way. And then hopefully, if you can see kind of the mental thought process I went through, some of the pain I went through, I can save you some of that yourself as you get into this. So going to be... So my life story, I'm going to get into some case studies for some context as well. What I'm going to cover is why student rentals, picking the right markets, picking the right locations, the student rental BRRRR, which is extremely important if you want to keep rocking and rolling, and building your systems and your teams, as well as the financing ins and outs. And whether or not you end up wanting to invest in student rentals, this is totally applicable for people who do single family homes as well. There's just a lot of specifics here for student rental investors as well. So this is me with my dad growing up. 1996 approximately. So my dad, for some reason, liked to build his own houses in the summers. He was a school teacher, and he just decided that he was going to build his own houses for our family to live in. So I kind of had a feeling that I'd be able to tackle it when I got into this, but I had absolutely no hands-on experience when it came to real estate in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I hung some drywall at the age of 10, so that was about the experience I had. But this is where I started getting inspired. So 2006, at Western University, these buildings were actually what did it for me, because my friends lived in that second building right there, and they were paying about $500 a month. There were five bedroom units, and there are 4 of them in one building, and then there are 4 buildings on this corner. And I started crunching some math when my friends were telling me what they were paying, and I figured that this owner was most likely making about $130,000, $140,000 after tax. I could have been way off, but that was just my estimate at the time. So I was hooked at that point, even though I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it. I knew I wanted to get into real estate. So this is my first lesson, is invest in what makes sense to you. I mean, student rentals made sense to me from the very first time I thought about investing in real estate. And that's because I was a student. And, I kind of thought about what I lived in and then what I would have liked to have lived in. So one thing I really like is that student rentals are economically hedged. I mean, case in point right now, Justin Trudeau passed funding for students. I think they're getting like $900 or something a month right now. Somebody can correct me if I'm not exactly bang on that number. But so basically, the rent that I'm collecting from my students is more or less funded by the government right now, except for the international students. There's a natural turnover, which is great here in Ontario because we can increase rents. So every 3 years, my students turn over, I can increase rents there. Ideally, I want my students to stay 3 years, and I'll talk about that more. Higher cash flow typically, but it is a business. And it's relatively easy to add value to student rentals. Basically, anything that adds income adds value. If you're dealing with the right appraiser and the right bank, you're going to be able to finance more based on that. So over here on the left is sort of like what I did live in. It wasn't that bad, but it almost looked just like that in terms of the quality of materials. It just wasn't debris all over the floor. This one on the right is actually a picture from one of my existing student rentals right now. That's actually the nicest one I have. Okay, so mortgage agent work. This is back in 2010. I worked with a great mentor. So this is my now mother-in-law, Carmen, and she was a real estate developer, real estate investor, and it was just like the stars aligned. I was just getting to know her daughter, Jordan, who's now my wife, and she mentioned that her mom was a real estate investor, and I had literally just finished telling her that I wanted to be a real estate investor, and I had no idea how. And that was like the stars aligned. I ended up being a fly on the wall with Carmen. She let me sit in her office, and I just listened to her make phone calls and make deals all day long. And I learned the business, and then I tried to add back to her by bringing deals in. And so this brings me to my second lesson, which is dive in and add value. Be a fly on the wall. If somebody will let you, try and add value to them. Try and do something for them. I have several people who basically have a value add relationship with me. They help me out in one way or another, and then I give back to them with instruction and coaching. I'm not sure that I really have any ability. If people are going to ask me that, have any ability to take on any more of those right now, but it's not to say I couldn't in the future if you do want to reach out to me. Okay, so let's look at, so my story here. My first properties I bought in 2011 and 2012. That was where I started, and I bought 2 single family homes, and then I ran out of money. And that's a classic story because I was just working, busting my butt trying to raise money. I didn't even have enough money to pay my taxes after I bought these 2 properties. I had to pay my income taxes on a line of credit. So I kind of strapped myself. So going into 2013, I actually worked out a potential JV with a friend of mine, and it was to buy a house and turn it into a duplex. And so I found a lot that worked. I found everything worked. I went to City Hall. I did all my research, but then the neighbors found out what I was going to do. And they actually, this is a picture. I made the front page of the London Free Press. All of the neighbors standing on my lawn saying, "Not in our backyard," calling me the big bad developer from Toronto, even though I was living around the corner. And basically, this was a really, really painful blow. I ended up hanging on to this property for 4 years for my friend, in trust for him to get his money back. So it was a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. And then at the same time, I bought into Ohio in 2012. I bought 2 properties down there. This is one of them. Great looking house at the end of a dead end street. You wouldn't believe it, but I got it for $12,500. And it was too good to be true. And yeah, that's exactly true. It was too good to be true. So my property manager ended up being this little criminal right here. He took my money. He collected rent from my tenants and then used it to live on. He allowed the place to be destroyed. I ended up giving this property away for nothing, to him, no less, because otherwise I was going to have to pay to demolish it and give it back to the city. So it was a really bad scenario. Imagine having your property worth so little that you have to pay to get rid of it. And that was kind of the scenario I found myself in. So all of this kind of combined to me saying, oh man, I'm done. Like I was beaten. I was defeated. And at end of 2013, early 2014, I was like, that's it. No more real estate. And I probably would have stayed out if it hadn't been for a couple of really positive people in my life. One being Carmen, who's just crushing it, and another being a friend of mine who's in the student rental game as well, by the name of Carlo. And the guy's worth like $20 million now. And it just those two people just being the people they are really did help me to come out of it. So I'm going to get to what that means in the grand scheme of things. So a couple of lessons I pulled out of this, which are just life lessons. I mean, it was a university tuition. I'm still paying off the debt from the Ohio stuff. But never assume someone else is looking out for your best interest. That's the big thing. Like property managers, they have to earn the right to be trusted. And you can't just assume that they can be trusted. Another thing, have a plan B and a plan C to go with your plan A. Like when I was in Ohio, I had no plan B and C. Like I knew that economy in Youngstown, Ohio was shrinking. I knew that the population base was shrinking. It was literally one plan and one plan only. And that is literally use the house until it's worthless and then just give it away. And it didn't really work well. I didn't have good oversight on it. I was far too green and I didn't take control of my business. And that really hurt me. And then be around those who inspire you. That's the big thing. Like I said, I wouldn't have got back in if I hadn't gotten around and been around those people that were such positive influences in my life. Okay, so me getting back into the game. So I was watching my friend Carlo crush these student rental deals, and I'm like, no, he can't have all the fun. He was making like $100,000 flipping them, and I'm like, well, I don't really want to flip them. I want to keep them. But I see an opportunity here. So I bought my first one. I ended up buying several. So I would start looking for properties in the 200 to 250 range. Can't really get that in London anymore, but you could at the time. And I was adding bedrooms. I was adding bathrooms. This one in the picture, I added an addition to the rear. And I did that to several houses. And I do critical updates like furnaces, wiring, roofs, windows. You can see this property really needed windows. They were quite old, and so was the siding. So anything that adds income to the property is going to add value. And also you have to understand, like when you're trying to get a BRRRR to appraise, you have to think about what things an appraiser is going to look for. They highly value you replacing mechanical systems, replacing old cast iron or galvanized plumbing with ABS and and PEX. And so anything that you can do that's visibly going to show as a major upgrade to the house does add value and helps an appraiser to justify a higher value. So I ended up buying 11 properties over the next few years, and I'll get into the specifics of this one. So that's the same house after. I'm not saying it's anything fantastic, but it was my first kind of more significant reno. And I couldn't end up refinancing that one the way the numbers worked out. There wasn't really enough margin there that I was going to be able to pull up my money. And I literally didn't have any money to leave in it because I'd financed it all with private money. So I was pretty highly leveraged on that one. So I ended up doing, in about 5 months, I did a $47,000 profit, and I knew that things weren't going to be the same. It was things, my life had sort of changed for the better at that point. So why did it work? So, my main takeaways are I took control of everything. I took control of my tradespeople. I was on site every single day, calling people, firing people, hiring people, until I found the right one. And I was firing so many people. I probably fired 30 people off that site. I controlled my financing. I found a financier to get the financing at the beginning. And I also even helped the buyer, who I found myself, by the way, find financing as well. Control the appraisers. And I'm going to get into talking about how I did that later. And then I rented that property myself. Like I was there, I was grinding it out, doing everything. And because of that, it was a major success. So my lesson out of all of that is once you're educated and inspired, it's time to take action. And taking action doesn't necessarily mean buying properties right now, guys, because it is an interesting time. And I'm not saying that I think it's necessarily the right time to buy properties, but I'm always open to buying properties. It's just a matter of the deal, as Austin mentioned. It's got to be worthwhile. When there's more uncertainty, I want more compensation. Austin, how are we doing for questions? Is there anything I should expand on? I can't see the chat box.
Andrew's appraiser system is gold. So
Okay.
that's a thumbs up. How did you raise capital for down payment and bounce back after the losses in 2013 with Ohio?
So I had one property that had equity in it, and it was like borderline barely worked. So I secured the mortgage on that other property for the down payment. And then I got an 80% mortgage on the subject property. And then I had all construction financing, everything built into my construction mortgage. So literally everything was borrowed. And then how I paid for the stuff, I would put it on Home Depot credit card, Amex credit card. I'd maxed them all out. At one point I had like $47,000 in credit card debt. So I was just constantly, like every time I got a credit card offer, I'd take it. I would just, and I will actually give that advice. Like if you get credit card offers, take them. Don't abuse them. Take them, because one day they might come in very, very useful if you're in this business, if you're trying to renovate a property. Keep in mind, private financing is expensive. So if you're just going to put money on a credit card for a couple of months, paying that interest is nothing compared to what you'll pay for legal and discharge fees on a private mortgage. So it is very useful to have that money available.
You mentioned you fired approximately 30 tradespeople. Any tips or lessons learned for all of us? Also, do you have your own employees as part of your construction business?
That's where I got to that. Yeah, I have my own employees now. But on the first one, I showed you the pictures of, no, I did not. So I was hiring people off of Kijiji. That's why I fired so many. And usually one of my first questions, just being very blunt about this, was, what drugs are you on? And I know that sounds funny, but the type of characters that would show up to site, some of them were so rough. Like that was my test, right? If they didn't respond well to that question, then I just said, don't come. I'm like, where do you live? What's your full name? Like, send me that. And then I will send you the address of where to go. And if they hesitated at all about telling me where they lived, then I knew they're not somebody I want to bring over to my site. That was a kind of a reckless approach. I'm not recommending that necessarily, but I was my own general contractor. I didn't hire a GC. So normally somebody with my level of understanding and capability at the time would have hired a GC. I, knowing nothing and having only the experience of being 9 years old when my dad built a house, decided that was what I was going to do. And I decided that strategically because I knew that I wouldn't have enough profit in that deal to pay a GC. So it's going to work differently for different people, but that's just kind of where I found myself later on. I mean, out of that, I actually found a really great carpenter that's worked for me for years, been a huge asset to me, made me a lot of money and a lot of equity.
So we have a couple of questions popping in, but let's take them maybe closer to the end.
Sure.
Or, I'll ask the questions that are relevant to
for each part. Yeah, for each part. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, we'll handle it that way, guys. If you have questions about what I'm presenting, we'll pause every 10 minutes or so, or 5-10 minutes, and we'll answer those questions, then keep rolling, and then we'll answer unrelated questions at the end. Okay. So this is probably the next property I did after that last one. And I ended up getting to keep this one, so it's a good BRRRR. So this is part of the summer of BRRRRs for me. I kept two properties that created a lot of equity for me. Okay, so I bought this one for $205,000. My renovation and soft costs were about $219,000, and that's including the money I borrowed. And I ended up getting a new appraisal on that property for $530,000. So when you work the numbers out, my new mortgage was $424,000 on that. I got a new mortgage, 80% with CIBC. And after subtracting off what I paid and what my renovation costs were, my actual investment on this one was $0. So this was done by August, and I had already signed the offer to buy the other property I bought. So I refied this one and closed the next one like in line in August. So I finished the next one by November. So it wasn't just this summer, but basically it sounds better if I call it the summer of BRRRRs. But anyway, so this is the first one. Let's get into what the cash flow was. So this one, I had it under rented at the time. Like I did the model where I added 5 bedrooms, 5.5 bathrooms, and I really wasn't sure what that could rent for. I didn't know what the potential was there. So I ended up renting it out for $600 a bedroom when it should have been $695. I just didn't realize that it could do that, which is a big difference across 5 bedrooms. So I got $2,400 a year in cash flow, which was minimal, but it was something. Mortgage pay down, I just like to figure 3%. So my mortgage is $424,000 at 3%. If you watch the podcast, listen to the podcast, you'll know why I do that. So $12,700. And appreciation, I was just being conservative at the time, figuring 2%. London's done 4% compounding per year since then, so it's been really nice. But so I was figuring a total return of about $25,000 on that property, which is great for something that I had $0 in. So, you know, how many of those do you have to add before you replace your current income, right? If you could do 4 of those and you make $100,000, well, there you go. Now, not all of that's cash, of course, but it's still there and it's still real. So ROI on that one, you can't calculate it; it's infinity. Okay, so that's the case study of the summer. I bought 2 properties. In total, the 2 properties for $450,000 to purchase. And when I was all done, they were worth over $1 million. And I had created about $215,000 of equity there. So if I wasn't hooked already after the previous project, this is where I knew, okay, you know, this is the right path. I'm on the right path. Okay, so why did this one work, and why was I able to do this? Why weren't other people doing this? Well, for one, I was seeing value that others weren't seeing or weren't willing to see. I was buying in good locations, but really small houses or houses with low basements where the average investor would look at it and say, there's no really good opportunity to make that a 5-bedroom rental. And, you know, if you can't get 5 beds, you're not going to maximize your value. So I was more looking at it, okay, well, what if I were to build an addition? You know, what if I were able to open up the back of that house and add area to the house, and what could I do? So that previous one I showed you, I used that as an opportunity to create something that didn't have any basement bedrooms. And students don't really like basement bedrooms. So I just saw an opportunity to create something really premium. And I knew, you know, I'm trying to do properties that I can keep here. I want to build them to be the best that they can be. So I was picking fantastic locations right near bus routes, which really helped me make that one rent quite easily. I had a very good relationship with a mortgage specialist. I met a guy from CIBC, and the way I met him is by calling other investors that I saw houses that were similar to what I wanted to do. They weren't like necessarily 5-bed and whatever, but they were clearly student rentals and they were really well done. So I called the investors. I would look these people up on a system called Purview. Realtors have Geo Warehouse, so if you have a realtor friend, you can get them to look them up. And I found doctors and lawyers and dentists. I happened to find a dentist. So I Googled his name. I found him. I called him at work and asked him who he used for his financing. So this isn't complicated, guys, but as Matt McKeever likes to say, it is hard work. It's not complex, but it is hard work sometimes. Okay, so qualified appraiser, my mortgage specialist dealt directly with his appraiser. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later in terms of how, but it's very important to control your appraiser and make sure you don't just get some guy that appraises random single-family homes for homeowners. That's not the same as investments. So it's really just about taking charge in your business. Effective property management and leasing, that was huge for me. When I was doing these BRRRRs, I was so focused on managing my sites and managing my workers. I didn't have any time to be managing students at the time. And I had a very good company that would do all my leasings for me. Even though I wasn't even done, they'd have my units rented out before they were even done. And then a great source of private funds. I was able to fund everything with private money. So not using the banks. I would go in because there's a lot of red tape when you use the banks. So when you can use private construction money, it's a lot easier. It's a lot quicker. And yes, it's more expensive, but in my mind, it's worth it. Okay, so lesson 7, and this isn't really my advice, but this is just what I did. Put all your eggs in one basket and watch that basket. It's an Andrew Carnegie quote, as far as I can tell. And, it just, for me, I was at kind of a breaking point psychologically. Things hadn't really gone that well for me before that. Never really found my stride with the mortgage business. I think I was pretty good at it. It just wasn't my calling. And, I wanted to find something that I enjoyed more on a daily basis to do. And when this all happened and I finally finished those previous rentals, I knew my life had changed, and it was a big deal for me. It's fun. Like, this business is actually fun when you get to be creative and you get to put stuff together and see it actually pays you too. So it's rewarding in so many ways. Okay, so sample completed project. This is the second one I did from that summer. And you'll notice here the bedrooms have ensuite bathrooms. So they're all the way down the hallway here. This bedroom at the end, they actually have a little dotted outline for a couch if they wanted to. And, I tried to give them basically what they would want in a really, really awesome student rental. So my strategy was always to create something that people would be proud to tell their friends about.
So quick question, Andrew.
Yeah.
This is actually very relevant to what you're talking about now. So before you were saying 5 bedrooms and 5.5 baths, does that have negative impact on your sales price if you want to sell it to a family in the future or anything like that?
It does. I wouldn't say necessarily negative, but you're not going to get any value out of those bathrooms, right? Like I've actually seen non-student houses. There's actually some in Hamilton right now that have en-suites in all the bathrooms, in all the bedrooms. But yeah, I'm not saying that this is something you would want to have like your whole portfolio composed of. But I've thought about that, as a contingency plan. What would my backup be? Would I Airbnb it? Once Airbnb is allowed again, I think there's an incredible opportunity to Airbnb these different bedrooms out, being that they are suited with en-suites. But it's one of those things where I think that it's just a lost opportunity. There's a lot of cost that goes into putting those bedrooms there. I mean, of course, I could just close the door and lock it, and then they don't have it, and it's neither here nor there. But yeah, generally speaking, I think it's that much more important now than ever. If you're going to do this strategy, you set that house up in a way that it really works for all. It's going to work for families. It's going to work for students. So here's some of the some more finished products. This particular house, I did quartz right up the backsplash. I have a quartz waterfall countertop here, vinyl plank flooring just because it's really durable. But all the bathrooms got quartz in them for every single bedroom, and then they get a tile surround on their bathtub. So these are full 4-piece bathrooms. Again, I don't want somebody saying, "Oh, but I wanted a bathtub," because girls like having a bathtub. It seems in my experience. So I could just do showers, but why not just do a bathtub with a shower component? Some more pictures here. I usually like to do an accent wall, and I include furniture in my common areas. So that furniture was provided by me. And okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about selecting a market, just kind of my thoughts. If you went to business school or you ever studied marketing, you would have heard of a PEST analysis. So I think it's relevant. I just want to talk about it. But basically, you're going to look at things related, aspects that affect your investment from a political, economic, social, and technological standpoint. So in our case here, political control from a rental standpoint is more about, would there be political changes to maybe regulate student rentals over regular rental properties? That would probably be my only concern related to political. I mean, aside from our government increasing taxation and changing capital gains, but those aren't really specifically relevant to these student rentals. But I would ask, the question is always, can I use this property to service families? How much work, how much money would it cost if I wanted to service families instead of students? And how much cash flow hit am I going to take? So you want to look at your numbers, and maybe when you're performing sensitivity, you say, well, how much is this going to change? If something were to happen, am I still going to be able to cash flow, even if I'm renting to a family versus students? Economic diversity. Is the local municipality self-sustaining, or is it driven primarily by schooling? And this is very important. If your city only has schooling going on, what happens if there's a general shift away from schooling? That could be very, very bad for you in the long run. And then, example here, like what if COVID cases lead to more online attendance in class unless people actually physically go to school? So that means physical attendance drops. A lot of the marginal student rentals might not get rented, or we might see just a supply and demand adjustment where the price of everything goes down and rents go down. So a lot of things to consider there. You could have called some of that social as well. But okay, so social trends. Do the programs offered at the school you're marketing to, are they geared towards where the trends are going? For example, right now there's a huge demand for tradespeople, blue collar workers, framers, plumbers, electricians, people who are going to have to go to trade school. Well, if you're investing in a city that does not have a trade school, that's slightly less good than investing in a city that has both options. Which programs are here to stay? So if you think about your school, the one you're investing around, if they have a school of medicine, if they have a law school, if they have a business school, like Ivy, for instance, like it's very interactive. So it'd be hard to imagine them doing that not in person. What is the likelihood that some of these classes, given this whole COVID incident, given, we might have something like this happen in the future, what are the odds that people shift away from in-school attendance? And on that note, technologically, Gary Vee likes to say, school's not worth it, and people could just learn it online. And I agree, people can learn pretty much anything they can learn in school online, and probably a lot better, with the exception of the fact that having somebody there to push you and hold you accountable is pretty much what school is all about. And a lot of people just kind of need that. So, but the question is, will there be a day when you can't really justify the cost of going to school? Like, will that happen? And again, this just comes back to the point. You've got to be investing in markets. Like for me, I'm not going to invest in a city that only has a school going for it. You could have all the cash flow in the world, but if there's not other industry to support, if there's not another way I can repurpose that asset to service a diverse economy, I'm not really going to want to invest there. Like in London, I love it because we've got corporate head offices all over the place. We've got healthcare. There's so many other industries that are not just focused around education. So there are some contingencies there, and the more contingencies, the better. It just lowers your risk, but that's also why people get less cash flow in London than say in Windsor. No slight to Windsor at all. I think Windsor's a great opportunity. Cash flow is higher there, a little bit less diverse economically. So picking the right markets. So look for well-established school with a wide draw. I like international draw. Like Western's got students from China, India, Europe, all over the place. I like a diversity of programs because, a school that's been around since the 1800s that has law school, medicine, engineering, probably isn't going anywhere. Whereas a school that just popped up 12 years ago, maybe it isn't tried, tested, and true. And really the only adjustment is cash flow. How much higher does the return need to be to justify your risk? Colleges, same thing goes. How long has it been established? I'm being very patient right now, seeing how this whole virus situation is affecting things. So note the program lengths and types. Here's a critical piece. Things are not all equal. Investing in student rentals for colleges versus universities. Colleges have a lot of shorter programs, which means more turnover. Turnover is extremely expensive. Re-tenanting properties is expensive. It includes maintenance. It includes paying a rental agent. So you have to factor that into your numbers. How often are you expecting to tenant that property? And really, just in your cash flow sheet, you might end up using a higher figure for management if you're having to turn the property over more. Set your own requirement for cash flow and cap rate. If you're not familiar with cap rate, no need to worry about that right now. Just focus on the cash flow, but it's a quick Google search away in terms of if you want to understand cap rate, and I'll show you on the spreadsheet at the end of this presentation when I pull it out. Okay, so know your target demographic. Who are you going after? And this is very important. You need to know who you're trying to reach. For me, I have a very specific person I'm trying to reach, and I'll talk to you about that as we go through. But are you targeting Canadians? Are you targeting international students? Are you targeting new to Canada? Do you have a specific income level that you're targeting? For me, I'm targeting wealthy kids that come from wealthy families that have parents that would have paid for them to go to private school. So I have many kids that went to private schools in my student rentals. And the whole point of that is these are people that have parents that are willing to pay a little bit extra so their kids can have more. And that's exactly what I want, because I'm not the bottom price. I'm definitely more than the bottom price in terms of what the market has out there. So what are their expectations? Do they want a furnished rental? Do they want internet? Some markets you have to provide internet. Some you don't. You need to do the research, and the best way to do that research is speak with your network, speak with fellow investors, speak with property managers. And if you don't have any of those connections, meetup.com, try and find them. If you're in this network, odds are you can find somebody who knows somebody. We got somebody without a muted.
Is not
Mark?
Yes, he is.
And I asked you to put the cream on Marcus.
I didn't hear you.
I did.
Mark?
I didn't hear you.
I think you can mute him. Actually, I can mute him.
You can mute, yeah. I'm not a host anymore.
Oh,
I guess when I gave you the powers, I lost mine.
Oh, okay. Do I need to admit anybody here?
I
I'm just
had a couple people message me. Anyway, like all of this is recorded, guys, so everything will be on YouTube after. All of this content is like absolutely free.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we got a few. So admit.
There's an admit all.
Oh my God.
Oh, fuck me.
You
Okay,
shouldn't
for next
have done
time.
that. Okay. Okay. I'll just keep this little window open now that I found it. Okay. Cool. Okay. So we've got 105 people in here, and I found the chat too. This is fantastic. Okay,
we have
Austin,
a lot of questions, but
Austin, do we want to pause and do a quick question?
Sure.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
do you want any? I'll start from the top of. Let's see. A lot of mortgage companies won't touch student rentals. What are your thoughts on it?
Okay, so I'm going to have a whole section on that. So
Okay.
we'll get there. Okay, next one.
You were quickly mentioning about renovations and how mechanicals are extremely important. What type of non-lipstick renos can you do to increase the appraisal? Non-lipstick. So I think you kind of touched on that, but maybe reiterate.
Yeah, like the key thing is when you do it, like have the invoices when you go, especially if you spend a lot of money, when you meet the appraiser, show them like, we're talking electrical wiring, if you had ungrounded wiring or if you had aluminum wiring or anything like that, if you pigtailed it, if you replaced the service, if you furnace, AC, those things all have a life cycle. Windows, technically a life cycle item. So if the appraiser sees you did this, now you've refreshed the house. Now the house is almost new again. So plumbing is another big one because eventually cast iron plumbing will leak. So if you replace it with ABS, again, these are things that, especially a lot of appraisers don't even fully understand what it is, and it's no slight to them, but when they hear you say it, they know they've heard other people say that's good, and they start to feel better about giving you a higher appraisal value. And especially if you can show them that you spent a lot of money, they feel far more justified in giving you a higher appraisal.
How does the mortgage stress test affect your mortgages on multiple properties? Maybe we can touch at that after. Or unless you want to go for it now.
The biggest thing, it makes it a hell of a lot harder. Like CIBC used to be my go-to, and that was when they would use the market rate to qualify me. So if it was like 3% or 2.69%, I'm going to show like one of my mortgages, I was able to get a full 80%. And now they're cutting me back to the point where I'm getting where I'm basically getting 65%. So it's a game changer. And we'll get into some of the specifics with that, but it has a pretty nasty effect, to be quite blunt.
And maybe one more before we continue on, and we'll ask the rest later. So you were talking about trades before. Which trade do you hire as your first employee? The carpenter? Question mark.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're looking for a skill set. I would say your first employee, you're going to want somebody that's very universally handy, very intelligent, a problem solver, hopefully has some leadership skills so they can be your site supervisor as well. That's a big thing. Somebody that can kind of run the show for you, because if you don't know who your site supervisor is, it's you. And if you don't want to be on site, being on site every day is a full-time job. So it's something to be very careful of. Do we want to do any more here? Somebody asked about the vinyl floor I use. I use a Beaulieu product from a company called Great Floors. I got a contact if someone wants to message me or just reach out to me on Instagram. I can put you in touch, give you guys contact. Okay, anything else, or should we just keep going? I'll let you can kind of compile some questions if you want, and we'll pause another couple minutes.
Sure, yeah. So we'll just continue going for now.
All right. So speak with local investors. Can't stress that enough. They're your lifeline. They're gonna help solve those unknowns for you. And rather than recreate the wheel and go through all the pain yourself of making mistakes, you can just ask them. Okay. So picking the right locations. Again, you're going to have to ask around. Even if you've got to put out dummy ads on Kijiji and Facebook and Western off-campus housing or whatever off-campus housing for the school you invest at is, see what feedback you get. Do you get a lot of inquiries? If you price the same as others, where do what are other people in your area pricing at? And I will say, don't take that too much to heart, because I've priced consistently quite far above all my competition, and that's kind of been my game. But that's okay. You can definitely get away with that as long as you're providing value, giving them something to pay for. So a good place to start is primary transit route. In London, we've got two primary transit routes that are really relevant. So you've got Warncliffe Road, which turns into Western Road, which my cursor is on right now. And this is the university right here. So this is that one line. So you can pretty much be within a 4-minute walk of anywhere on that road within reason, going down to about Riverside for anybody who knows that. And you're okay. The other transit route is Richmond Street, and you can pretty much, again, be anywhere within a 4 or 5 minute walk to a bus stop on that street, and you are pretty much good to be a student rental. Now, the question is how far you are will dictate what kind of price you're going to get. and then how far you are from the bus stop. Like you could be further away, but if you're only a 1 minute walk to the bus stop, you probably would get rented faster than somebody who's half the distance away, but a 6 minute walk. So it really is relevant. And again, you don't know unless you speak with your property manager, you speak with your tenants, you speak with, hey, what do you like? What don't you like? Or what would you improve here? There's also a market for downtown rentals, and I imagine other university cities are like this as well. But I lived downtown right after I graduated, and I loved it. And I have a student rental downtown. It doesn't make any logical sense at all. They have to walk further to get to the bus stop. It's really just good for nightlife and partiers. So you do kind of attract a different tenant down there. So that's the only thing that I don't love. But it's a fantastic location to be downtown, and a lot of students demand it. Okay, so how long does it take to walk to the bus stop? It's something you're going to want to be very familiar with before you buy. Total time door to door. These are critical, and these are marketing pieces. So for instance, you might even want to take a picture of your Google Maps walking map. And this is one of my properties, 1 minute away from the bus stop, exactly 110 meters. And when I'm marketing this one, I literally just go out on the porch and point and say, see, the bus stop's right there. And it makes it a lot easier to rent that property. And if you were trying to market this property, I would probably put this in the photos of the listing so people knew just how close that is. And it's really going to help you to get people to come out for the property, even if it's a little further away, as long as you can get to the bus. So at Western, people take the bus. Their bus pass is included in tuition. Not every university is going to be like that. So again, you want to feel out the culture for your local school and see if that's something that's common at your school as well. Okay, so a couple of pictures of some of the renovations I've done, and if you want to follow me, these are just Insta posts, so I haven't been keeping on my game lately posting this stuff, but I have a ton of stuff. If you go back, you can see different projects I've worked on at the Andrew Hines on Instagram. So that's a loft that I finished. This is an addition I built, so you can kind of see the construction type I do. So this is a heated crawl space. This was a self-contained 2-bedroom, 2-bath unit, and featuring heated crawl space, about 920 square feet. Really cool project, turned out really nice on the inside. That one's actually not a student rental, but it was a keeper for me. And I'll just wanted to give you an idea of the type of renovations that I've done. So we'll keep moving forward here. Okay, so building your team. So you have two main options. You can use a good general contractor, or you can become one. Really, there's no two ways around that. So if you're going to become a general contractor, you're going to save some money potentially, and you're going to make some mistakes that cost you some money potentially. So there is a trade-off there, but it's a learning process. And if that's the path you want to go down and you're planning to do this long term, it might just make sense. If you're going to do any of it, you just want to make sure you're leveraging your network. So the RISE network here, I'm sure there are probably through 1 or 2 degrees of separation, like 100 contractors that you could make connections with that would be a major asset to your team. I do not recommend hiring trades without a proven track record. I told you how many people I had to fire. If you're not keeping the closest eye on it ever, you could find yourself in a lot of hot water. And I have, speaking from experience. So being your own GC, I only recommend doing this if you think you have a reason to be successful for it, or if you see the value in investing the time and energy into learning this skill as a kind of a life skill, and maybe even start your own construction company like I did to service yourself, and then of course maybe even helps other people as well. So build relationships with each trade if you do this. So if you're like me, try and be fair with everyone. I was on site every single day, but I was making connections, and I've kept multiple connections that I met from that first project. Ensure that you have a site supervisor. Like I said, if you don't know who it is, it's you. I was at a point where I'd be driving to the hardware store, and then I drive back to site, and they tell me, oh, we need this. And I drive away, and then I drive back to site. And then I was literally just driving all day running errands. Don't be that person. Like that's not worth the gray hairs that you'll get for doing that. If you hire a competent site supervisor, they can make lists of things that are needed, and you can order those things on the phone. They get delivered to site. There's a way to do it properly, and there's a way to do it horribly wrong. And you don't want to do it the wrong way. So use milestones instead of deposits. I had multiple people I've worked with over the years ask me for deposits. Oh, we take a $2,500 deposit or a $5,000 deposit, then we'll start. My answer has been a firm, sorry, I can't do that because I did that in Ohio, and I lost an incredible amount of money. And I don't even say it in exactly those words, but I just say because of experience, because of past problems with that, I can't do that. But here's what I can do. We can do milestones. I will pay you every week. You do value, I'll pay you. I'll pay you in partial installments. I have no problem paying you frequently, but I can't give a deposit. If they need materials, provide them yourself, bring them to site yourself. I strongly advise against giving money up front unless you have an extending relationship with that person and you have a lot of trust there already. Even then, I don't like it. It's just an unnecessary thing to do. People should have their stuff together enough and enough trust that they can start working for you without requiring a deposit, in my opinion. So be fair and pay fast. That's the biggest thing. Like, way to a contractor's heart, pay them fast. The second they're done, they send you the invoice, send them an e-transfer right away. If you're that person, they will just perk right up and say, hey, Andrew, you got any other projects going on? You know, yeah, we love working for you. You're great. Be the customer that your trades love to work with. Don't try and nickel and dime them at the end or anything like that. A lot of people have it in their head that tradespeople are just desperate for work. No, good tradespeople have a lot of people that want them to work for them. So if you're the jerk that always nickels and dimes them, they're just going to say enough with you, and you won't have a repeat tradesperson, which will cost you a lot more than it saves you. Okay, so hiring a GC. If you are going to hire a GC, here's what I recommend doing. Search your network, number one. We've got so many in our network. I've met so many, and this is all after I kind of became my own GC, but I talked to these people. You know, we're all in this business. So there's lots in our networks. But if you can't find one in your specific area, ask around, go to local meetups, find out who other people are using. You always want to get references. If you can't get a direct reference from somebody else who's used it, then the next step is to drive around the neighborhoods of where you want to do a project and find somebody doing work on a house, go up to those houses, find the contractors doing the work, find out who they are, get references, find out who owned the house that you went up to and call them and ask them what they think of that person. And here are some questions you can ask them. Again, guys, this isn't rocket science, but it is hard work. Finding those answers, totally doable, but it might be hard work at first. But this is about building a team. Building a team is kind of a pain in the butt. But once you do it, you can just reuse it again. How have disagreements been handled? Have they stuck to budget? Are they professional? How is their pricing? How is their timing? Are they delivering as promised and correctly? And are there areas for improvement? And there always are. So it's just a really good idea to make sure that you are asking these questions. Austin, are you? So we are still recording.
Everything's being recorded. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I know you handed control over to me, so I don't know if that changed, but it's probably recording to the cloud, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Use a detailed scope of work. It's not enough to have an email saying, "Hey, we can do the job for $50,000." What's included? You know, if you're using vinyl plank flooring, there's $5 vinyl plank and there's, $2 vinyl plank, and one is vastly superior and going to last way longer. So you need a detailed scope of work if you're going to use a GC. It's just not enough to take somebody on their word, again, unless they have a sparkling track record of working for everybody under the sun and you can see exactly what they do. Even then, it's still a risk. Proceed at your own caution. But on that note, nothing I say here tonight, guys, is advice. Always make your own decisions. Always consult your own investment advisors. I'm just telling you my experience. Okay, so renovating for success and being effective, part of that is your offer process. Because if you structure your offer properly, you can avoid wasting time, and time is money when you're in renovations, because renovations, you're carrying a property, you're usually paying for money. In my case, I'm paying for expensive private money, and I don't want to be waiting 2 months for a permit. I want to be able to close that property and start the next day. And by doing the things that I'm about to show you, I've been able to have a permit in hand before I even close the property. And I've done that many times. And how do you do that? Well, you write it into your offer. You write into your offer that you have the ability to apply for a permit prior to closing the property for work to happen after closing the property. So I always include that. And then I also include a term that says I have access to the house before closing a set number of times. Usually I'll try and sneak it through that I have as many as I want, as long as I give reasonable notice, 24 hours. And usually people don't have a problem with that, which is surprising. Sometimes they do. They're like, no, you got to limit it. But it's usually the realtor that does that. It's not the person, it's the realtor that's asking for the limit. So those are the two things I do. And always work with an engineer or a qualified designer. I work with an engineer that has his own designers, so they do everything in-house. I've had a relationship with him for 5 years, and we just have such a give and take relationship. He's such a valuable asset on my team. And again, just getting back to that point of how valuable it is to nurture that team. Okay, so the renovation. Focus on value add renovations. Focus on things that add value. And like I said, things that add income indisputably add value. So bedrooms and bathrooms, when done tastefully, are a good idea, but it is not a good idea to go stealing your common area space so that you can add a 7th bedroom. I want you to keep in mind that it's easier to rent a 3-bedroom than it is to rent a 5-bedroom. And it's easier to rent a 5-bedroom than it is to rent a 7-bedroom. So the more bedrooms you have, the harder it is to rent. And think about the logic of it. Why would it be harder to rent a 7-bedroom? Well, you're asking 7 people to live together, that they all like each other enough that they're okay with that. What types of things would you need to compensate for to get that to happen? Well, one would be having bedrooms that have bathrooms in them. That helps. That's going to make it more likely. Really big common areas, maybe a second kitchen, things like that just kind of help divide up the space. But that being said, like the most bedrooms I have in anything is a 6. And that happens to be in a dynamite location, so it's easy to rent. But I wouldn't want a 6 that wasn't in a really awesome location. It would be hard to rent. So remember your target tenant. What do they want? And don't ever go against that. Make your decisions based on who you're trying to serve. If you're going after a high income tenant, they want better value. They want better quality than somebody who's going for the cheapest price, and you have to give it to them. Otherwise, you're kind of wasting your money and wasting your time. Okay, so when you're renting your project, as I mentioned, I do it based on blueprints. Get good virtual tours of your first property, and you can use that to rent your next property. You just say, hey, I'm building another one. Here's the floor plan. Here's one I just finished. You can go see the one I just finished and the one I'm working on. I'll show you the studs. We can't walk in, but I'll open the door. Or if they, I'll give you a hard hat and boots if you really want to walk around. But usually just with the floor plan, yeah, you can do it. I've actually walked people through a house that I just took possession of. It was stinky, moldy, like gross, dark, dingy, and I charged a premium rent in a non-premium location based on walking them through a gungy old house because I had a set of blueprints in my hand showing them what I was going to do. And I showed them another property that I didn't do. I showed them another property that my friend had done. And I'm like, see this is what we're going to do. I took them all over in my car and showed them the property. And, it's just about selling, right? If you sell with enthusiasm and be a genuinely nice person in this process, deliver on what you say you're going to deliver and don't misrepresent anything. And you should have no problem in that process. All names on one lease. This is coming from my experience as a mortgage agent, from every lender I've ever talked to, also from bylaw conformance. If you're not all names on one lease, then technically you're operating as a rooming house. And not only will that put the bank off, most likely, but it'll also be in breach of the bylaws unless you're zoned for that, unless you have that status. So maximize your rents. If you have to give away a free TV or a free couch to get an extra $100 or extra few $100s in rent, do it. Because the bank looks at your income to decide how much mortgage they're going to give you. So buying your tenants a TV, if they'll pay you an extra $100 a month, it pays for itself. In my mind, it's well worth it because they're not going to move over $100 extra a month. I'm saying that as a house. You could probably get like 150 or 200 as a house, maybe for doing something like that. You have to feel it out, but try the different things that you can do that can maximize rent. Make sure your leases end on an appropriate date for your school. So at Western, April 30th is the day. So you want your new lease to start May 1st. April 30th it ends. Other important dates are people start looking for their new house in October, September even. So think of like by the end of September, people like first years are just getting to school and they're already meeting groups and they're starting to look by the end of September. It's crazy how early people look at Western. I don't know if every school's like that, but Western is. And you need to be aware of that. Like if you miss those dates, you lose opportunity to get premium rents. Get parental guarantors. There's absolutely no reason not to. They expect it. A lot of students expect it, especially in the echelon of students I go after. If you're going after a student with well-to-do families that have a higher income, they're generally willing to pay, and they're willing to guarantor as well. Use a quality appendix or addendum document. So the Ontario lease, let's face it, it sucks. It doesn't protect you as a landlord. Austin, do you have something you use, like an addendum that you use for your lease?
Yeah. It's like a 1 or 2 pager.
Okay. Yeah, I have one that I got from Harry Fine. It's like 13 pager.
Oh shit.
You probably don't need one that big, but yeah, Harry offers that. I don't get paid to promote that, but I thought it was a pretty good package. It's a little harsh. I actually took some of the terminology out of it because it was like, wow, that's scary. Scary for the tenant signing. So anyways, We'll keep going here. So getting into the BRRRR, the refinance. So you want to work with somebody with a track record that's actually doing deals now. Somebody who's actually doing, student rentals on the regular. Don't go work with somebody who says they can, who says, yeah, we should be able to do that. No, you want to call up the guy that just refinanced one, or talk to the guy in your network that just refinanced one and ask who they used and who's doing it in your area. Because if you know the person who's doing it in your area, they know the appraisers in your area, and they probably have a crafty little trick to make sure that appraiser gets the deal. If you work with smart, capable people who specialize, you'll find that type of scenario, and it can be the difference between having a deal that you can't even finance your renovation costs out of, to having a deal where you can finance everything, your down payment, your renovation costs out of it at the end, and then do another deal. So it's very, very significant. You know what, just before I keep going, I'm going to just look through these questions real quick, Austin.
Yeah, you got a lot of questions.
They're building up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. To where did we leave off? I gotta. We already answered the carpenter one. I think that was where we left off. So the next question would be, what are the top few qualifications a property has to meet before you purchase? Obviously, things like 1% rule, having the specific cash on cash return. So I'm sure you have like a minimum. Any other criteria you personally use to determine what you want to purchase?
Well, assuming I'm in a market that I like, I'm looking for, the BRRRR, obviously. So I'm looking for a deal where I can pull most, if not all, of my money out. And if I can't, then the other strategy I've used is to basically look at that deal and say, if I were to privately finance my entire down payment, like say I was to put a private mortgage on one of my other houses, and if I were to finance the entire down payment, could I still cash flow a few $100? And I ideally would still want to cash flow, like say $300. If I could do that, I'm still into that deal. So I'm always looking for the strategy where I can get in with no money down, because I want to keep building, keep growing. Not to say that I'm right. That's just my preference, right? That like everyone's going to have their own criteria, their own preference. Like some people just have $200K sitting on hand, ready to put into a long-term hold. If that's you, then there's a lot of deals that could probably make sense, especially with that kind of a down payment. And I'm actually going to pull out the spreadsheet at the end of this, and we can just go through some scenarios and kind of ask some questions and talk about that. So
perfect. Hello, Andrew. How did you learn about creating these building layouts? So you touched on it a bit, right? So maybe you could reiterate.
So have your engineer, somebody who talk to your network, find somebody in your area that is creative like that, because they need to have an ability to come into a space and see what it could be. So the company I use out of London, they basically, I'll call them up, they'll come in, they'll do the measurements to measure up the existing layout. They take that back to the office, and then they send me a bunch of options, and I say, no, that won't work. No, that won't work. Okay, this is the one. So sometimes they have good ideas, sometimes they don't, and we just work through it. And then once they finalize the layout that will work, then they engineer it. Once I give them the okay, they'll engineer it. Sometimes they would jump the gun and just engineer it ahead of time. I'm like, guys, why'd you do that? Like, we should just wait until I say that I actually like this. But generally speaking, I just left it up to them, and they just created a great layout. So that's what happens when you work with professionals. So
did you require permits? Are you doing permits?
Yeah, anything that needed a permit got a permit.
Gotcha. You're a good man. Okay, so Victoria's an architect, so you guys can reach out to her if you need help with design. McMaster announced only fall semester will be online 70% of their classes, while the other 30% is hands-on. Mohawk is planning for in-class and hasn't made any announcements on virtual education.
I think Windsor has already canceled the fall, right? They're going to be online.
They're going to be online. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't heard anything from Western yet.
I think, well, actually, I'm not sure if all universities would follow suit, possibly.
They probably will. That's another rant we can get onto entirely. How
can you shop for a well-knowledged appraiser?
I would start with the lenders. If you're clear on what you're trying to do, you can always find the answers. Go to the neighborhoods you want to invest in. Why do you want to invest in there? What do you like? You saw a couple of houses that looked right to you. Go find a realtor friend, look them up, find out who they are, track them down and call them, find out their story. If not, just go to your local meetups and hopefully you bump into some of those people. But that's how I did it. I just kept, I was very location specific. Go to your neighborhoods, find out who's financing those properties, because that's your answer.
Yeah.
They're the ones that can do it.
Do you use wholesalers, and what city are you investing in?
So,
So London, right?
Yeah, I'm like primarily London. Not that I wouldn't use a wholesaler. Absolutely, I would. But everything I seem to find, like, it hasn't really catered to my student market. But absolutely, if people were wholesaling properties in the areas that I liked, yeah, absolutely. I just feel like in London near the university, everybody knows what they got, so it's harder to find a real deal. The guys wholesaling in London tend to be in the lower East End, like along Hamilton Road, where that was typically a stigma area, but now it's revitalizing. All the East End is revitalizing, so there's a lot of good deals, but it's definitely still a good value.
Andrew, is the appraisal for refi, you saying, wait, what is that? Oh, okay, so he or she's basically asking, with the appraisal, when you talk to, like, with an appraiser, are you saying the fixes, or is the mortgage broker saying the fixes? That's what I'm getting out of the question.
I go and meet the appraiser on site, like meet them, talk to them, shake their hand, walk them through everything you did. And then the other thing you do is you do your research ahead of time, know what your competition has done, know what the other properties have sold for, because the appraiser might not necessarily know. In my case, a lot of the comparable properties didn't sell on the market, so they wouldn't function as comparables for an appraiser. They're not going to see those pop up. But if I know about the property and know what it is, I can bring that data and I can share that with the appraiser and say, hey, that house just there sold for $600, and the appraiser would be like, it did? Yeah, I'm like, yeah, and it only had 4 bedrooms, and mine has 5. I'm just curious, like, what do you think? If that one's worth 6, what's mine going to be worth? Seeing as I've done all this work, and that appraiser might have been thinking in the 400s, and now I just anchored him or her into the 600s, and that can be very valuable. Don't think that what you say and do when you meet an appraiser doesn't have an impact. It absolutely does.
And we'll just end off with one more question, then we'll continue and answer the ones a bit later. Can a GC normally be the site supervisor as well?
Yeah, a lot of GCs will, or they'll have somebody that works for them that'll be the site supervisor. Like, guys, like what I was talking about with site supervisor, that's really only relevant if you're going to manage it yourself. If you're working with a general contractor, they're going to have their own employee that handles site-related issues, and that general contractor is going to sub to other people, but they'll kind of handle it all and make sure it all flows. If they're doing a good job, that's what they'll do. Okay, so we'll keep moving here.
Yep.
All right. So know your lender before buying. Like, I say this because, sorry. I say this because I would buy with like private money. So I've used pro funds for private money. They set me up with construction financing, all that. And then I've also used like other sources, just like hard money lenders. Basically, like, I just like to know who I'm going to use for my financing before I even get into the investment. And it's really critical, like, that what's my game plan, have your network in place, have the people you're going to use in place. And that's what I mean, like, you drive around that neighborhood before you even get started, and you make those calls, and you make sure that you know who your team is. So control your appraisal. Like I said, it can be done, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Show your appraiser the comparables. We were just talking about that. And I just did want to mention there is a bit of an overall tightening in Austin. You've probably noticed it too. Banks are cracking down a little in the current situation, especially on the commercial side, because a lot of commercial lenders are getting burned right now because all these commercial businesses can't operate. So they're losing money and defaulting to a certain degree. But the government's coming out with some options there. But I have noticed, I've heard some feedback. Some lenders they used to do 75% loan to value, and now they're down to 65%. And they're just kind of pulling it back. It's not to say that deals aren't still happening, because they absolutely are. And even on the residential side, they're still doing 80% loan to value. I've just, general feedback I've got is people are a little slower. So controlling your appraisal, I'm just going to explain this now. So how this works is, basically, appraisals go through a brokering system. I think I actually have this on my... this is coming up. I'll save it. Okay, so your options are for financing. You basically have your regular banks, your TD Canada Trust, your BMO, your Scotiabank. They'll do your 80% loan to value, your 30-year amortizations, but the problem is they don't like student rentals. They don't like student rentals. So I'm sure anyone who's tried has probably got that feedback. No, we don't do student rentals. I used to think it was impossible to do student rentals, but that's why you drive around the neighborhoods and you find out how they're getting it done. And generally speaking, on this side of lending, they're pretty much just sneaking through the cracks. Like they're just slipping through. There are certain ways that you can disguise student rentals so that they still go through as regular rentals. And to the best of my knowledge, that's how they're getting done. Not that that's not the most sustainable thing when you know that that's what's happening. So that's why it's good that there are other options. So the other options are commercial lending. So those same banks, BMO, TD, Scotiabank, if you walked into that branch and you said, can I speak with commercial lending? They would probably give you a business card and a phone number that would be different from the main bank. And now you call in and now you're dealing with somebody who loves student rentals and they have no limit to how many properties you can buy. And the only caveat is they're going to treat you like a business. So they're going to give you 70 to 75% loan to value instead of 80. No limit to the number of doors. In fact, they like it when you have more, as long as you're following their guidelines. They care more about the business than they do about you, the applicant, more about the property than they do you, the applicant. They're looking for a debt coverage ratio, and I'll show you how that works at the end. But it's basically they're looking for 1.2 times to 1 your operating income versus your mortgage service. So there's 20% money left over. Higher interest rates typically and shorter amortization, so it's going to make it harder to cash flow, which means you need to get better deals. And or you need to take lower loan to values and come in with more money. So a couple of options there. But it is possible, it is doable. So credit unions are the hybrid of the two. So if you go into credit unions, they're willing to basically do what commercial lenders will do, but they have a little bit more flexibility. They don't have a minimum number of doors. Usually to work with a commercial lender, even if it's residential properties, they'll still take you. So commercial lending will do residential properties, but they call it multi-residential. And that's when you're 5 or more doors, and that could be across 5 different properties, but as long as you've got that, they'll work with you. On the credit union side, they don't have that restriction. So they'll still work with you, even if you don't have 5 doors, even if you're just on 1, and they'll look at you like you're a business. So they'll give you the 75% loan to value, and they'll give you the higher interest rate. But even if you wouldn't traditionally qualify, or you couldn't finance a student rental, those credit unions will still look at you. And not all credit unions are the same, but there are several out there that will do these deals. Okay, so controlling your appraisal. I knew I had a slide on this. Okay, so in commercial lending, you can pick your own appraisal and it doesn't matter. Like you don't even have to hide that. You can just call up whatever appraisal you want and get it directed to the bank. So that's fantastic. It's just good news. On the residential side, you go through a system that basically brokers your appraisal. So there's a couple of different companies that act as these brokers, and I don't know officially what they call them, but Nationwide Appraisal Service is one, Solidify is another, FCT, First Canadian Title, they do a bunch of different things, but they're one of them. And basically, so when your broker or when your lender hits submit, that appraisal request goes into a pool, and then it gets randomly assigned to an appraiser, or the appraiser picks it up. And I don't know if they all work the same or if this even still works, but I hear people still doing this. And where there's a will, there's a way. But basically, my lender would just call the appraiser. He'd say, hey, Drew, I'm about to hit submit. Can you pick up this appraisal? And he'd hit submit, and the appraiser picks it up. And now you've got somebody who actually knows your product, your investment product, and is not just Joe Home Appraiser that doesn't know student rental investments.
So to add on to that, I think your broker can choose the company. I'm not sure about the direct phone call to the person, but likely if they choose the company, hopefully everyone who works there kind of appraises the same.
Well, my experience with NAS, for instance, when I used to work in brokering, I would submit appraisals with NAS, and they would mask the appraiser's name. I couldn't even find out who I was dealing with. It was like appraiser anonymous and a number, and you couldn't even know who they are. And then it was like Kijiji. If they tried to type their email address, it would mask it. You couldn't see it. And so what you have to do is I think it's, if you absolutely can't find a lender that can do it for you, then you network and you try and find a good appraiser that understands it, and you get that appraiser's direct contact, and it's more about directing that appraiser to pick it up. So, I mean, assuming it goes into a pool and isn't directly assigned. So again, guys, like I don't know specifically, I haven't seen specifically inside of these. All I know is I've seen it happening. So in some way or another, people are able to control their appraisal. And if you can find the people that can do it, you're off to the races. Big thing there would be if you're just working with people who are having a lot of success, odds are they have an angle on this. So you don't need to get too into the weeds with that, hopefully. Okay, so find somebody. Key is having a relationship, as is with so many things. You can refuse an appraiser if you think they're really unqualified, but you're probably going to tick some people off. So just, I've never actually done it myself, but a friend of mine has, and I've heard of it happening elsewhere, but you got to be careful. You got to be careful with that. So worst case scenario, if you absolutely just don't have confidence that the appraisal is going to go well after you have a few conversations with this person, you could potentially request that a different appraiser be assigned. So know your comparables. Again, I already spoke about this. Make sure you know your comparables, guys. This is your business. You need to know what stuff is selling for. You need to know your neighborhood better than the appraiser knows it. You absolutely do. Okay, property management. I'm going to try and go through this relatively quickly. So if you're hiring external property management, I've done both. I've managed myself and hired externally. So I'm going to go through the pros and cons of each. So if you're hiring external, systems are already in place. There's significant access to prospective tenants. So if you've got a property manager that's showing hundreds of units, they have all the extra kids, 3 kids from this group and 2 kids from this group that they can combine to make a full unit. So could be really useful. And it's obviously an asset. It helps speed things up. The other thing I really like is they have payment collection. So the manager I was working with, they did direct withdrawal on the students and they direct deposited money into my account. So I just got slammed full payment, which was great. It comes in like a handful of days after the first of the month. The problem is when you work with a management company, you're one of many. They can't prioritize you. Their priority is their business, not you. You're just a part of their business and you're not in control. And those of you who have listened to my podcast know I'm a bit of a control freak. And that's just because of what's happened, right? You have enough bad things happen. You're like, okay, well, I'm going to have to control my business so I don't keep getting burned. And so self-managing, you're in complete control, but you're in complete control of your own mistakes too, and you can make them. You get to know the whole process, and the more you know the process, the more you're able to react when things happen. If tenants are saying your price is too high, you'll have a direct finger on the pulse there to know and be able to respond and react. There's far more profit in the long run if you do it this way. I do believe that. But I don't believe in doing things all yourself. You have to create systems, and then you have to eventually, hopefully, hire employees that are going to come work within your system, and that's going to be the more affordable way to grow. But I have no problem with property management. I will absolutely work with external companies, no problem there. I expect to in the near future. It takes significant time to set up your own systems, and it's significant energy, but in my mind, it is worth it, and it is a long-term play. There is a learning curve, and you can make mistakes, which is the biggest risk, because big mistakes can cost big money. So the biggest thing I could suggest to you if you are going to self-manage is have a really great network. If you don't have a really great network in your city where you invest, reconsider that decision. Because when things come up and you don't know and you're not sure, what do I do with this? If you don't have another investor that you can say, hey, I'm having this problem with my rental, what would you do? You're going to be reinventing the wheel. It's not to say you can't do it. It's just how many headaches do you want? Okay, so some operational musts. This is non-negotiable. So you need to have a series of emails or an actual tenant booklet that outlines what tenants are supposed to do with garbage, what the expectations are with cleanliness, rent payments, maintenance requests. You don't want to be getting a call in the middle of the night about a light bulb. In fact, I would prefer that my tenants didn't have my phone number. So I basically give them very specifics, don't call me. And I also back it up. I won't answer when they call. Unless we've pre-negotiated something where we were going to talk. I might even just respond to their call with an email. See, I saw that you called me. What's up? So you just want to keep that consistent. Another thing is have a spreadsheet with the names, emails, phone numbers, lease terms, end dates of the leases, the rent amounts, and the payment methods. Whether you use management or not, if for some reason your property manager fires you, like mine did, you want to make sure that you have all this information. I didn't. When I got fired, I didn't have any of that information. So I was scrambling. I didn't have a direct withdrawal system. I didn't have anything. I had no idea what I was going to do. And I had like 20 days to go figure it all out. And I did, because the pressure was on. But I'll give you the story why my property manager fired me. I had a property I felt like could rent for $800 a bedroom plus, and he had it rented for $750. And all he said is, all we're going to do is we're going to get $750 again. We can't get you more than that. You're not going to get more than that. That's the most we've ever rented anything for. End of story. I'm like, okay. Well, I thought about it for a couple of days. I'm like, no. So I went into the office and I'm like, I couldn't speak with the same guy. So I spoke with another guy there. I'm like, hey, I'm going to rent out my own properties this year. This is too much. I really feel like I could do this. And I want to do that. I want to save the money too, because I was saving a lot of money in rental fees. They emailed me 2 days later and said, we're firing you as a client. So anyways, but it worked out really well because I immediately saved like $12,000 in rental fees, like no joke. And then I ended up getting $860 a bedroom instead of $750 times 6. So $660 of extra cash flow. That's not little. That's a lot. And, again, goes back to the point. They're not going to prioritize me. Their priority is their business, not my rental property. So that's why I like the control there. I'm not saying that you can't work it out, but with my specific type of product, I felt that I needed to take control of that. So anyways, automatic withdrawal system, as I mentioned, that is important. So I use a system called Pendo Pay, which is paired with a Pendo property management software. It is a subscription. It costs like $29 a month. And I wish they would pay me to promote it because I promote it all the time, but they don't. But I use that, and I don't really use it for the property management, but the seamless payment collection dropping into my account is something I would never give up. You do not want to leave the payment initiative in your tenant's hand. They will forget. They won't initiate the e-transfer on the first of the month. It always happens. And when you're getting 26, 27 payments a month, that can get annoying. Got to have a handyman, so make sure you're building your network. Make sure you have somebody that can respond. You'll also want to have a rental agent, showing agent, even if you don't have management, somebody that can go open doors at very least. So even if you're self-renting, do you have somebody that can go open the door? Must have, put a lockbox on your properties with spare keys for all the bedrooms, spare keys for the front door, have key-coded front doors. Those are things that you can do to really streamline your system. So I would have a separate code that I would give to, like, say, a handyman or, an HVAC contractor. If they showed up, I'd say, hey, here's the code. You can go in, and it's a different code than the one the students have. Okay, so 24-hour emergency plumbing and heating company. You're going to want to have that as well. And you put this in your email. You say, hey, if an emergency happens in the middle of the night, don't call me. They already have my billing information. Call them. They'll come 24 hours a day. That is the number one lifesaver, because anything that somebody's going to call you for in the middle of the night is pretty much heating, air conditioning, or plumbing related. I can't really think of another thing. I mean, unless the house is on fire, in which case, totally different. Or a flood, but flood, you call the plumber. What am I going to do? I'm not going to be able to do anything in the middle of the night. Have good photos, have good floor plans, and good virtual tours. Really critical to just help you market your property and market it over again. I've made that mistake of not doing it, and I would say don't ever pass up the opportunity to get a really good virtual tour. Timing matters. Like I said, know the dates, know when students are looking so you don't miss out on properties or opportunities to get premium rents. And okay, so the lockdown, getting your house in order. So a couple of specifics here with this reaction to the virus. Liquidity matters now more than ever. And liquidity matters when you're managing uncertainty. I've generally made it a policy to have $10,000 to $15,000 per property in cash, just because that's what helps me sleep at night. Not everybody will feel the same, but for me, that helps me sleep at night. And it kind of sucks because it sucks to have money sitting when it could be working, but I consider it operating capital, and I treat my rental portfolio as a business, as I believe everybody should. Secured lines of credits and unsecured lines of credits could potentially be frozen or pulled. Check your contracts. I don't consider those a guarantee. If the bank got concerned enough, they might just freeze up your lines if they felt that the loan to value was compromised. Again, I haven't heard of that happening, but I do see it as a possibility. Definitely with the unsecured ones, because those ones are more of a, hey, you're a really good client, we'll let you do this for a while. But if you ever become not a great client, they could easily turn it off. Be patient. I really do think there are good deals coming in the next 12 months. And if we hadn't already run so far, I would have gotten to a macroeconomics talk. But Austin gave you the podcast to go listen to if you want to hear me talk about macroeconomics and currency and all the things that are so wrong about this COVID situation and the response, and our government irresponsibility is just beyond words, guys. Just beyond words to me. But anyways, not to get political here. So I think opportunities are coming, and the reason for that is we're raining money on an economy. We're raining money on an economy, but we're also killing jobs and killing business at the same time. So we're probably going to see a contraction followed by much greater inflation, and then of course taxation to follow. We're going to see a lot of things, but my gut tells me that in the short term it might be a rocky road, but there might be some real opportunities down the road here. But if you're investing for fundamentals, you don't worry, as Austin said, you don't worry about price. You know, if your price goes up, it goes down. If you're confident in your economics and your market, what you've got going on, you know that you have something that people are going to want in good times and in bad, then you're not really worried about that happening. We got somebody. Oh, there we go. Okay, so let's keep moving here. So just a couple of thoughts. Keep this in mind. Canadian dollar is a fiat currency and is by definition worthless. It is not worth anything. It's a piece of paper. You have to keep that in mind. Big banks and our government are essentially stealing from us by injecting more currency into the market, because now every dollar we have goes less. It buys less. So you have to balance the need for your operating capital with your basic desire to preserve the buying power of your dollar, right? I would love to have all my money in real estate, but then what do I buy food with? I don't want to have to worry about that. So it's a constant balancing act. So you have to find that critical point where in all of this madness, you feel comfortable that you know you can sleep at night. Like, think about it. There are tenants that are asking. I had a tenant ask me, "Oh, Andrew, I'd like a rent. I'd like a free month of rent." So the day before rent was coming out of her account, she emails me, "I'd like a free month of rent because of the situation." I'm like, well, you know, here's the situation. Here's how I responded. This money is due, regardless if you delay or not. And I will happily work with you. I wish you had reached out to me a bit sooner because I can't stop the payment. It's an automatic payment. Happily work with you, but I really don't want you building up a debt with me. So why don't you talk to me? You know, let me know what's going on. We can get on a phone call and we'll work something out. Like, how many payments do you think you'll need to do it over the course of this month? So I made it very clear that this isn't going away. And I explained, I don't get a discount on my taxes, on my mortgage, on my insurance, anything. I have to pay all this stuff still. So unfortunately, I can't offer that. And all she did is just respond back and say, "Okay, no, it's all good." And then she paid rent as normal. So, you know what I mean? I think they're going to try, but the kids are getting this grant, as Austin, as you mentioned, they're getting the grant. So, you know, they don't need to not pay. We're fortunate. Where this becomes the problem is if we still don't have school back by January, now, like, come May 1st, like, I'm trying to rent out for May 1st, 2021. That's where we might hit a bit of a rocky road. Anybody who's buying a student rental right now, you make darn sure that rents out and cash flows well as a family rental. Like, do not bank on getting student tenants right now. If you don't already have a lease in place, don't bank on it. If you find yourself with a vacancy right now, start finding a way to repurpose that so that it can service families. Because I'm not saying you won't get them, but you're going to want to have a really good contingency plan. So real estate has real value, real intrinsic value. It's like gold and silver. It can be used for things. People always need a place to live. And as owners, we stand to benefit. Like I said, when we go on this inflation ride, I believe we stand to benefit. And again, listen to that Sarah Larby episode if you really want to dig in a bit deeper. Key consideration is, in the absolute worst case scenario, if everything goes to hell, the government falls apart, the currency falls apart, we're in absolute chaos, people still need a place to live. So if you are servicing a group, who are you servicing? Who is going to want to rent your property? And how much will you have to adjust your prices? I think if you're in the lower end rentals, you're probably maybe even going to see rents pushed up a bit. But if you're in the luxury market and people just are in chaos, like, they're not going to be able to pay those rents. So again, if you're thinking about buying property, you have to think, well, what if I had to reduce my rents by $500? Like, what is likely to happen in your market? How much would you need to address? And this is why cash flow is so important. I know, Austin, you said, people who can get break even in Toronto are okay. Well, case in point why that's actually not okay, in my opinion, and I'm not trying to argue here, so don't mind. But rents in Toronto are down 33% right now, 33% from a few months ago. So my wife has a property that's just re-tenanting for July 1st, and now she has it rented out for $3,700 a month. Now what's she going to rent for? So she had cash flow, and now she's probably going to be negative cash flow. So again, like, a big buffer is so important, because you just never know what might happen. If you don't feel like you've got that property, that property that can handle and weather a storm, if a storm is coming, maybe now you want to consider making a change. The market's still moving. Properties are still transacting. It seems like there's still an opportunity. So a couple of remarks. Networking is huge. So network and take action. Analyze deals daily if you're just getting started. I have a cash flow spreadsheet I'm going to share with you. Take complete responsibility for your results. We all have obstacles, but the results are still our responsibility. Hedge your risk with everyone you deal with, and that goes, contractors, property management. The more you are in control, or at least have the ability to take control, the better off you're going to be. And then always have a plan A, B, and C. And let's see here. So contacting me. So at the Andrew Hines on Instagram or Facebook, if you want to reach out to me, that's the best way to send me a message, guys. A lot of messages in this chat. I don't know if we'll get to them all, but we'll try. If you want to check out the podcast, Linktree, my handle is still the Andrew Hines. And Greater Hamilton REI meetup, Austin would always be coming out to those when we were having them. So we'll eventually be back to meeting up in person. And just a quick note on this, guys, think about the Canada that we know and love. There's one way for this virus to go. There's one way, and that's herd immunity, no matter what, whether it's vaccine, whether it's just normal resuming, there's one way, and Sweden's doing it, Japan's doing it. That's herd immunity. Everybody gets it. So I don't want to live in a country long-term, this is just me, where everybody walks around with something over their face and I can't see it. I want to see people smile. I mean, call me selfish. I want to see people smile. I want to go out, and I want you to encourage you to question things a little bit here. What is the media's motive? What are some of the multiple motives going on here that are pushing this narrative when we see so many signs that we're coming out of this, and so many signs that we're moving forward? We're devastating our economy every single day, when we know at the end of the day, most of us are more likely to get hit by a bus than to die from this. So it's just things to ask questions about. I'm not diminishing it. I know people have suffered from this, and we've all been impacted from this. And of course, I have my own biases. I don't deny that. But I really, really do think it's important that we question what we're being told here, because I have I just have a real feeling that the media is not always looking out for us, and do need to be questioned more. So it's just my side tangent.
Sorry, if you guys are interested in hearing more about that, because I guess it could be a hot take for some people. You dive really deep into the Sarah Larby podcast. So yeah, make sure you guys check that out.
Hey, I'm not going to say I don't start controversy sometimes, but I do call things like I see them. I've started questioning things from a very young age. I'm an investor, business person. I went to business school, and we questioned CEOs. We did case studies. We were questioning everybody. Nobody is above questioning. And nobody is to be assumed to be altruistic. We are all a certain percent altruistic and a certain percent selfish. And to assume anything other than that would be silly. So anyways, side tangent, I know. Okay, so cash flow analyzer. This is my cash flow sheet that I've built over the years, just kind of tweaked it, made it something I like. It sizes up the profitability of a deal in a couple of minutes, and I'm going to show you a sample of that. Ensures you meet commercial lending guidelines. So if you want to check out if you meet that debt coverage ratio I was talking about, I'm going to go through that in just a second here. And if you would like to get a copy of that, maybe just do a screenshot of this. It's Andrew-Hines/cash flow. And maybe somebody can just write that in the chat, just so we have it. So it's really, really simple, Andrew-Hines/cash flow. And I'm going to go ahead and just pull this up on the screen real quick. I'm just going to stop share here and close this. And let's see here. Screen share, basic. Sure. Okay, can you see the spreadsheet?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll go to this. This is actually one of the properties that I showed you from that summer of BRRRRs. This is actually what I have it rented for right now, and these are all my expenses from 2019. So I took them right off of what I sent to the accountant. And so this one I have rented for $695 a bedroom, which is $34.75 a month. So it's $41,700 annually. I didn't put any vacancy in here. I've never had vacancy on it, but obviously you can add that in. We'll perform some sensitivity. So here are a couple of things I'm just going to go through. So my taxes on that one are $49.35, which is actually kind of high for London. Originally when I bought it, it was $600 a month. And then because I got a permit and because I did renovation, they reassessed my property with MPAC, and my taxes basically doubled. Yeah, how's that for, you add value, we tax you more. It does. I don't know. The logic doesn't really seem like it's there to me, to be quite honest. But so bank charges, these were like transaction charges from direct withdrawal payments, $103. I also billed the property management software I use to this property specifically. So this property has slightly higher expenses because I kind of put all the expenses against it. Cleaning, I had to clean it once on turnover for $498. I had a $1,300 rental agent fee. My electric and water was $24.14, and I had $721 in gas. Insurance, that's with tax, that's what I paid, $1,466, which is actually higher. I used to pay like $1,250 on this, but insurance went up. So constantly see changes, and you got to be prepared for them. Maintenance, these are just like furnace filters, odds and ends, fixes, paint touch-ups, this and that on turnover, $1,340. And then landscaping, I had to pay $904. So students don't cut their own grass. I do that for them. So, okay, so here's how that all shakes out. This is my actual appraised value that I had back in 2016. This is the amount of my mortgage, 30-year, 2.69%. My mortgage payment was $1,750. My cash flow, actual cash flow is $553 a month on that property. So I would like it to be higher, but that's still pretty solid. I mean, that's a property that I had next to nothing into. And so if you go further down the sheet, and this is the one that you can get off the website, the only thing I would say is there's a couple of hidden cells on it. So if you just highlight them and go unhide, you'll be able to see all of them. So I've got my pay down over 5 years, and the way that's calculated is actually with a mortgage amortization chart here. So you can actually calculate how much is my mortgage paid down, because that's part of your return. 4% appreciation is what I've actually gotten. So I just went ahead and did it and added it in. So if you add all that up, you've got your mortgage pay down, you've got your appreciation at 4%, and then the cash flow that I got on a yearly basis. That's $38,000 return. So if I bought this property at the value I got it appraised at, my return on investment would have been 32.86%. And I apologize if I'm going fast here for anybody. Catch the replay, and of course you'll have a chance to play with the sheet yourself. But in reality, I didn't actually put $117,000 into this. This calculated $1,700 for legal fees. It had calculated my land transfer tax, and it has my down payment calculated. I was only in for about $8,000 on this one. So my return is like 482%. Again, not reasonable to expect that. Doesn't always work like that. But if you're getting perfect BRRRRs, your infinity return, right? And that's the idea of a BRRRR. That's why a BRRRR is so powerful. But okay, so change gears. If I was just looking at this deal from an outside perspective, this is how I would fill out the sheet. So I would have my number at the top. So 695 times 5 in the cell. And so that's the total. At the time, because my taxes were $2,600, I would have assumed that maybe they'd go up $1,000 or whatever. So I would have probably plugged in $3,500. I would have figured $3,600 for utilities. I actually came in less than this, but $3,600 is $300 a month. So 1,200 square foot house, that's a fair assumption. For insurance, I would have figured around $1,300 because that's my experience. But I'll highlight the ones in yellow where I think I should perform some sensitivity. You know, like what happens if that goes up? What happens if that goes down? So maintenance, I would just figure 5%, management 8%. But here's the thing. If some managers charge 8% plus leasing fees, if you're paying that, you're more like 12%. So you got to adjust these things. So here I might think, so I might change this. So I might say, okay, I'm going to edit this. So I might think I've got $511 in cash flow. But then I say, well, wait a minute. What if I can't find a manager for as cheap as I want? Or what if I have to re-rent the property more than I expected? So let's perform sensitivity. And sensitivity is just adjusting my assumptions. So I'd say, okay, what if I'm 12%? Well, now my cash flow goes down to 372. And you have to ask yourself, is that okay? Am I okay with that? Am I okay with having only $370 bucks? What happens if that happens and my taxes go up to $4,500? You know, still got some cash flow. What happens if my insurance goes up? They have a really bad year with insurance companies and they go up to $2,000. You know, so what happens if that happens? Well, I still have cash flow. So this is me testing the possibilities. This is me testing what if something bad happens? What if something else bad happens? What if 3 bad things happen? Am I still okay? Because the problem with those Toronto investors that invested at break-even cash flow or negative cash flow that are now about to go to maybe negative 1,000 is, how do you sleep at night? When you know say it starts with that, but then you go underwater and you owe more on it than it's worth, and it's negative cash flow. I mean, I think the psyche of an investor is just too damaged by that for most people, unless you have a really strong constitution and you're really not bothered by things like that. You know, everyone's different. Everyone's different. I'm not making judgments here, but for me, I would have trouble with that. So that's why I mean to say, you know, test your assumptions. So these are some of the assumptions that I would peg, and you'll notice that my cash flow is roughly in line with what I actually got. Maintenance, if it's an older property, I would probably want to go 10%. Because if you had to repaint the house, one house to repaint is going to cost more than $2,000 in 1 year. If you're repainting that house every year, your maintenance, you might as well put in 20%. So you really have to consider property by property. If it's old, what things could go wrong? Do I have sanitary sewers? Do I have an old furnace? If my sanitary sewer has roots in it, I could have a backup. It could cost me 20 grand. Replacing that sewer could cost 5 to 10. Depends on how far you have to go. So you really do need to investigate things that might go wrong with a property. And again, take a look at the spreadsheet, play with it. I think you'll find it helpful. I shaded it with, edit the blue cells, but if you're savvy with Excel, you can edit the other ones too. You always know where to go to get a copy of the original again. So with that said, let's just open it up to questions. Austin, I'm sorry this went so long.
No, it was amazing. And we still have actually a lot of people still on. So
okay.
Definitely great value. Thanks for that, Andrew. We're gonna jump into a bunch of questions. We have a lot to get through. So where are we starting? How do we...
I'm going to try and find the questions again.
How would appraisers not know the comps? I guess you were talking a bit about some appraisers not being super knowledgeable.
They might not know a comp if it was... The main reason it's off market. So there's a lot of properties that trade hands off market. If it didn't get listed, they won't know the comp. So that's the biggest single reason, but there are other appraisers that just miss stuff. I don't know. Like maybe they set their criteria to look within the last 3 months and there was a sale 4 months ago, but they didn't even see it. They didn't even acknowledge it. Right. And perhaps if they had, they'd say, oh, wait a minute, why'd that sell for so much more? So it's your job as the investor to make sure that you're aware of that so that you can head off that problem before it happens.
Yeah. And sometimes appraisers don't go in level-headed. Sometimes they already have something in mind or they're emotional, right? If you force them to kind of give you an appraisal price, they might get offended and just like talk you unnecessary. You
need to, with what I said, caveat, you really do need to do it with tact. Don't go telling them their job, right? You try and be curious, right? Approach it with curiosity and always, I don't want to say submit, but I'll always acknowledge their authority in the situation and acknowledge that you're not trying to control their outcome.
100%. How do you convince all students to sign one lease when they don't know each other?
Well, they should know each other. So I aim to get groups that form them on their own. So that's the key with knowing your timing. They meet in September and these students form a group, and I actually only really will deal with groups. So I ask them before I even show them the property, make sure they have all 5 people.
Is a permit required for lipstick renos or when you're adding a bedroom or living space?
Well, if you're adding living space, then yes.
Yeah.
But like if you're adding an addition, absolutely. If you're taking out a wall, I think, generally the answer is going to be for electrical. If you're moving electrical, you should have an ESA permit with your electrician, not with the city. That's a little bit of a gray area, I would think, to just remove one wall or add one wall. But generally, if you're adding bedrooms, I believe the answer is yes. They're going to want you to have a permit.
Mm-hmm. Is it true that student rentals don't appraise for much?
That they don't appraise for much?
Yeah.
Not true. No. If you have the wrong appraiser, anything can appraise poorly. Appraisals, I haven't found to be my main challenge with them. It's their lending criteria and the stress test that make it really challenging right now to get. I'm closer to like 65% on my last refi. That was the loan to value I got. So. And
again, you try to avoid that by not putting in like 10 bedrooms in your property and also at least having a common living area. So it's not really like all bedrooms in the house.
Well, a big challenge is that like, cause we're slipping them through as residential for the most part. They're like, so with CIBC, they would take a market rental rate of a family rental, not a student rental. So I was getting like 51.60 a month in gross rent. And they were only giving me like 3,800, which was still generous. That was still really generous.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see here. Go there.
Most of your real estate portfolio is in student rentals in London, which is a city with a lot of corporate offices, so you're able to pivot. What about a city like Windsor, which isn't as diverse? How would a student rental be affected due to COVID-19 as, I guess, courses move online only?
So Austin, I know you've got a few student rentals down there too. I mean, you can probably speak better to what Windsor has going on.
I think it just really boils down to what I was saying before is that even if vacancies increase, if you're in a good location and you have a good product and you can drop rents temporarily, theoretically you should be able to rent it out because your product that you're offering in the markets is going to be more desirable than other ones out there. There are always going to be great tenants in every city. Just, of course, Windsor is more blue collar in nature, so we're taking a bit more risk by investing there. But again, the good product, good location, if you can compete with market rents, then you should have no issue renting yours out versus some other like crappy products that are out there. But it's always going to be a risk.
It's all supply and demand too, right? So if you can afford to come down a bit in your rents because you have excess cash flow, then you're basically going to be in a position to react and handle it. And especially if you have the premium rental location, if you have the better product, even if a lot of other people go vacant, you might be the last one to go vacant. So you hedge yourself that way. But I mean, isn't that why you get higher cash flow there? Like there's a trade-off, right? You get higher cash flow and you take a little bit more risks. And that's classic investing 101, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The risk reward.
Yeah.
Can you use an independent appraiser, one that your lender doesn't approve, and use that for the refinance appraisal?
No, like they're very strict about it has to go through their system. It has to go through NAS or Solidify or FCT, FNF, whatever it is. They want to have it. So no, you can't go around that. Don't go find your own appraiser and then just get them to make an appraisal report.
Do you encounter any pushback or difficulties making your students sign one lease agreement?
No, they're totally cool with that. I just explained to them this is what we do, and this is the legal way of doing it. Is really the truth of the matter. And I say, so your rent is $695 a bedroom, but you'll see the total on the lease, and they're all equally responsible. It's really nice. It works really well if there are ever damages or anything like that, because they're all responsible. So they behave and they act generally like I get good tenants. And when there was a problem, I just had some problems. I had some damages on one of my units, and I told them this is what it's going to cost, and they sent me the money within a week.
Can you go over the formula for debt to coverage ratio?
Oh yeah, that's the one I forgot. Okay, good call. All right, let me do that right now.
And what cash flow should we aim for on a property that won't affect our borrowing power?
So you'll notice that I did that sensitivity there, right? There's not a hard number of cash flow that I can give you. As long as your property is in surplus, most lenders are most likely going to look at it as a wash. Like companies that use a debt coverage ratio, like CIBC, for instance, if you have multiple properties, they basically take this approach even on their residential side.
Nice.
But they still apply residential guidelines. So you're not working with commercial lending. It's not the same as that, but they do kind of they borrow some of the wisdom of commercial lending. So there's not a hard number. I found for me, like if you look at, like you've heard of the 1% rule, like I'm probably not buying something unless I'm getting at least 0.65%. And now like probably looking for more like 0.8 to 1%, depending on the type of asset. But I would only be buying things that work as family rentals right now. So looking at this number, what's my rule here? Let's go. Yeah. So no, it's not actually 1%. 0.64. So that's kind of where I want to be. I noticed that there's like a nice amount of cash flow in that range. I can usually make something cash flow reasonably well. I also will look at cap rates. Like if you're thinking about a cap rate, like I'm really enticed if I can get like a 6 cap in an area I really like especially for student rentals. Really hard to find, but I've bought a couple like that.
So are you looking at your cap rate actually from ARV value or your purchase price?
This cap rate is from this value here. That's ARV.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I would look at it from ARV. Mm-hmm. Like if I can get it there, and especially if I can pull the money out, then I'm laughing. But I would actually buy a 6 cap just because if I bought a 6 cap, and this sheet calculates it for you, so you can just figure that out. But if I buy that, then I know that I can even put in a private second mortgage. So I could actually put like a 22%. So 22% second mortgage for, let's see here, that times And I could put it at 10% interest rate, say, and what's that going to work out to on a monthly? It might even cash flow. On this one, it won't cash flow, but so this one you'll see that it won't. But let's see here, sum of, and might have to update the formula. I wasn't meant to have that there, and. Okay, for some reason that's not updating right now, but basically you could add that other mortgage in, and you would see that I'd be negative, right? Because that's a $993 payment. I only had $511 in cash flow. So if I were to borrow a second mortgage there, I wouldn't be able to cash flow. So in that certain circumstance, I wouldn't be interested in buying a property just straight up with no BRRRR involved right now. Especially right now, right? But in other circumstances, I might. Whereas if all of a sudden you start to see this number around a 6, that number I just tried to calculate, that'll start working. So I'll be able to use secondary financing to cover my down payment, and I'll still cash flow. Those are the type of deals that are great. And I'm sure if you work out the numbers on those, we're closer to a 1% rule. Maybe we're like a 0.8%, something like that. Okay, so the DCR. So how that works, why we came over here. This is your operating income. So once you take you have your rents on the top, and you'll usually have a vacancy rate. The lender might use 3%, so they'll put that there. And then they will take all these expenses off, and this is what's left over. So you start with $41,700, and then you take off all your expenses, and you've got $25,928 left. Now that number is basically compared to your annual debt service. So the annual debt service is $21,000. And $36, and they divide it out, and that's where the 1.23 comes from. So that's how that works. Guys, the best thing I could recommend is grab the sheet and then click this and see what numbers go into it. So see how that works. Play around with the sheet. It's probably easier to go hands-on than to just see me explain it, especially because I'm trying to go a bit fast because I know we have a lot of questions to get to.
Do you make your students pay utilities, or is that included in rent?
No, I listened to my market, and the students want inclusive, so I just bill a bit higher, and I have updated plumbing, updated electrical, updated heat sources. So usually like the 1,200 to 1,500 square foot houses are around say $275 a month on average for me.
Oh wow. Yeah. Does your rent include mortgage payment? I think that means cash flow is what he meant to write. Does your cash flow include mortgage payment, which you do have that down on your calculator?
Okay. So for cap rate and for DCR, you don't figure the mortgage. This is the way you should do it. Use the spreadsheet the way it's laid out. So you figure out your operating income, which does not consider your mortgage, because the logic is you want to figure out how the asset performs, not how your financing performs. So you're first figuring out how your asset performs, and then you're considering your mortgage second. So that's why mortgage falls underneath that on the sheet.
Thoughts on commercial or residential appraiser as a career choice? Interesting question.
Well, anything, and I say this a lot on the podcast, anything that you can do to get into the industry, you're going to learn. Like, even go work for a property manager. I can't imagine, like Sarah Eder talked about it when she came on the podcast, and just how fast she's grown. She would never have grown that fast if she didn't have that hands-on experience. So anything you could do to get right into the dirt and like just handle everything, you'll have so much more confidence. So if you become an appraiser, I'm not sure you're going to get as hands-on experience that you're going to want, but it depends on what your goals are. If you don't intend on being a real estate investor or using it for that reason, and you just think it's interesting, then by all means.
For the first-time home buyer, how do I avoid hidden problems like potentially broken sewage?
You can camera your lines. So the big costs, the big things that are going to cost you money are potential leaks. So whether they be from plumbing, your roof, they be from your sewer backing up. Water is pretty much your enemy. Water and sewage are kind of your enemy. And then shorts with your electrical. These are things that can be a lot of money. Rewiring a house can be a lot of money. Furnace failing, you could be $5,000 there, depending on who your contractor is. So just know the high cost items, and make sure you have a good home inspector or a good contractor that's helping you out to check over that property. But even still, if it's used stuff, some people just can't predict. You can't predict when something's going to give out and just go. But you can camera your sewer line. You can do that. So do that as part of your home inspection. It might cost you $100 or $200.
when you refinance, don't you need 20% left in the new appraised value? Therefore, how do you pull out all your money in a BRRRR? I guess more of a math question.
Yeah, we did cover that before, but I mean, so you look at, this is the number, right? This number here is 80% of what I got it appraised for. So I had bought that house for $245,000 and my renovations were around $220,000. So when you work that out, I was in for like $8,000. So I got a mortgage for $433,000 and I was into it for $440,000, say. So after all that, I was in for like $8,000, $7,000. And that's how you can pull all your money out. It's not about what you have into the property. It's what the appraiser thinks it's worth.
Yeah.
So you have to compare that to what you have in, and hopefully if the appraiser thought it was worth $1 million, I could have pulled out $300,000. So it really just depends on your ability to know your market and to know what it costs to add value in your market.
Phil says he's getting quite a bit of response from students for September in Windsor. It's good. It's good to hear. I know Phil also does the ultra luxury student rental similar to you, so maybe that's why as well.
Cool, Phil. Well, hey, that's awesome. So people still want to come to school because they know they're going to be lined up for January anyway. That's awesome, man. I'm stoked to hear that.
Does Pendo pay withdrawal money from each different student or just one? Is there any risk of rental being deemed a rooming house based on the way you collect rent?
No, not to my knowledge, no risk at all with how you collect the rent. But yeah, Pendo, it takes it out of every single student's account and I get an email from each single one. So then I use QuickBooks Online. So I just, I have them all set up in there. I just type in the numbers. And I would recommend have your books in order, guys. If this is a business for you, I would highly recommend using a service like QBO or the likes. I mean, they seem to be the dominant in the industry and I really don't like that. Like, I don't like that Amazon's the only site people buy from or Walmart or whatever. Like, I like competition. So if somebody wants to start another bookkeeping company, by all means.
Do you include utilities in DSR calculation if the tenant pays?
No, I wouldn't. But it depends on what the lender does, because every lender is a bit different, especially on the residential side. The lender might just assume it. And then on commercial lending, like RBC would look different than TD. They all have their own formulas. So I would prepare this when I send it over to them, but they might take my numbers and tweak them anyway. So I'm not really in direct control of that. The best thing to do is to ask them ahead of time what they consider, or if they can send you their cash flow template, like ask them for their cash flow template so you can see what they do.
What would we do for BRRRR what would we do for a BRRRR if private for down construction mortgage do updates to boost equity to refi under commercial mortgage and pay back private? I'm assuming he's saying that the down payment is going to be borrowed and he's going to use construction mortgages for the updates to boost the equity to refi. And he wants to refi under a commercial mortgage and pay back the private down payment.
So he's asking if he uses
I guess
a private mortgage and then refinance?
And refi, right?
Like asking, can you do that? Or because
I'm not exactly sure. Maybe you can confirm, Gerbier. Until then, we'll move on to the next one. How do I find a mentor?
Oh, yeah, Gervier said yes.
Oh,
so 542 average market value, similar homes, post-reno. Would the appraiser visit those homes in case? So your first question, Gervier, is yes, you can do it. Private mortgage is what I've used. And you can secure the mortgage on other properties. 100% loan to value is not going to be a possibility unless you have other properties that they can secure. Yeah. So if you have your own home, a mortgage broker can set it up where they can actually blanket your home with a second mortgage, and that covers your down payment on the one you're buying. So there are creative ways. There's a way if you have homes or properties with equity in them. So regarding the 542, would they go into the other houses? The answer is most likely no, because you'd have to get permission from those people. So it's not really going to happen. But if you had for instance, the appraiser I was working with a lot, she would say, send me every sale agreement you have on every house you do. And I get everybody else to do the same. So she's like, so I have all the comparables. And then she could use them. If she had sale agreements on other properties, she could use them. I more would use my comment as as a reason that they should look into it. So maybe they can talk to another appraiser. I can say, hey, I know that appraiser appraised this property. Maybe you could speak with them. And then those appraisers might be able to share between the two of them to get the information. Because if they can't find the comparable, they can't use it. But if somebody else can help them get the confirmation, then they could use it. Okay, so did we get most of the other ones?
Yeah, we just have about three or four questions left.
So how do you recommend we make sure we don't over leverage ourselves? I think it comes down to cash flow. And I know you said something similar, you said, don't go to 80. I think I get your logic there. Like, it's all a factor of what market are you in? What is your true risk? The less pivots you have, the more cash buffer you need. And so every market's different. For me, if I have a property worth $540 that gets $500 in cash flow, like, that's borderline where I feel comfortable, because that's a pretty true number. Like that number is not lying. That's an accurate number. Whereas a lot of people will calculate their number and it's a false number. It's not real. You won't actually get that. So let's see here. Do private lenders like to see a track record of you doing deals with conventional lending before working together? It doesn't matter who you financed it with in the past. Private lenders want to see a track record, of course. They look at you like a business. Same with commercial lenders. They look at you and say, show me your resume. And usually the broker will do this, right? The broker will say, hey, can you send me a CV? Send me a list of properties you've done, a little write up on your experience and why you believe you're capable of handling this. So if you're not doing the GCing, then you just say, hey, I've done this property, or I haven't, but I have this these financial assets, and I've hired this GC, and I've got my after. So you'll get an appraisal as is and on complete. So right when you're setting up your financing, they give you an appraisal for as is, and then they give you an appraisal for what it's going to be worth when it's done. So you have to ask for that, and you submit it to the lender, and that's so you give them confidence that way, so they can see, okay, this actually is worth something, and you've hired a GC to get you there. Is that? And I apologize, everyone, for going fast.
No worries. This is great. We still have 62 people on, so a lot of people are still tuning in, getting value out of it.
Okay. Yeah, anyone wants to send me direct messages, just do it on Instagram, or Facebook. It's just easier if I missed anyone, or if there was something you wanted to ask me privately.
So maybe we'll just hit these last two questions, sure, and then we can wrap up. Would you do a non-conforming duplex, or go the extra mile and, of course, the renovation expenses to have a legal conversion? What are your thoughts on the pros and cons of both?
I generally I don't like investing money in something that's legally uncertain. It's all like it's weighing the risk versus the return, like everything, right? So I have a rental property that has one bedroom that's technically not a bedroom, because you can only have a maximum 3 legal bedrooms per unit in London, and I have one of them's grandfathered in, but the other is not. And it's a matter of, do I have a pivot there? Could I rent it out as a 3-bedroom? And yes, I could. And I could actually charge more for each bedroom if I did that. So it's not really a big deal if I get shut down for 4.5 to go to 3. So as long as I'm comfortable with knowing that if the money I invested might be wasted, then it's a go, right? It's how long does it take to pay back versus how likely is it you're to get shut down is the real question. Not that I'm advising you to do anything illegal. I'm not. This is my thought process. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the last one, when did you purchase your first BRRRR property? Did you set up a company to purchase it, or you just bought it personally? And at what point would you consider setting up a company for BRRRRing, or I guess investments in general? Okay.
So there's a good episode of the podcast that you should listen to, my podcast. I think it's episode 48 or 49 with George Duby. Mm-hmm. And we talk about taxation and, basically some of the things to consider. So short answer is I actually did everything personally early on. And then I eventually started a company to flip properties, because I didn't just keep them. I did do some to sell. And so I was flipping properties with another company that I created for that, because there was a taxation reason to do that, because active income in a corp was like 13%. And as far as owning for buy and hold, I have created a company that I have that for now. But generally speaking, like I think there's a lot of pros and cons to both. Like I like owning personally for some of the tax treatment and for the capital gains incentive. But at the end of the day, I think both work. If it's a long-term strategy and you plan to buy a lot of units, I think buying in a company makes a lot of sense. And if I could go back, I mean, assuming COVID hadn't happened, I had it on my mind a lot that I would want to switch my properties into my company so that I could start using commercial financing all underneath the company umbrella. So that's the biggest reason, just using commercial financing under the umbrella of your company.
Cool. So that pretty much wraps up all of the questions here. So I want to thank you guys, and especially Andrew, for spending the last 3.5 hours or like 2.5 hours here with us, dropping value. I definitely learned a lot. Andrew's always teaching investors as much as he can. If you guys haven't already listened to his podcast, definitely check it out. All of this will be online completely for free as well. Again, Andrew is not getting paid for this. Neither am I getting paid for organizing this event. So if you guys can and you guys enjoyed the information that you learned, make sure to give Andrew a follow on Instagram. So that's at the Andrew Hines. I'll just write it down in the chat.
Yeah, guys, and if you wouldn't mind, if you do enjoy the podcast, leaving me a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, it helps the podcast reach more people. I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, and again, we're not getting paid or anything for this, so all we do ask is to just show support whenever you guys can. Of course, take action on the stuff Andrew and I mentioned throughout this event. That's it on my end. Anything else to add?
Well, no, thank you so much. I see all the comments there. Everybody saying thank you. Really appreciate it. I'm glad you found value, and any feedback or things that you think I could do to improve, shoot me a message, and then I can always tweak it for future times I give this talk. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Thank you guys. Okay. We'll see you guys next time.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks again.
Do you need me to stop this recording or?
No, I'm stopping it.